One of the big things about exploring Draconis Mons, the new map in Flashpoint, is that there are a variety of little items you can collect around. One of them are the Firestone Shards, which are essentially this patch's version of White Mantle badges or Masat coins or whatever, and I'm yet to finish that. But the other is really interesting. They're recordings from an Asura, Zinn, who had come to Draconis Mons many years ago in an attempt to terraform the place and build a city for his people, a place known as Rata Arcanum that we now find in ruins around the chasm and being investigated by the Inquest. So Zinn is a really huge character. Zinn is actually the subject of one of the most recent Guild Wars 2 mystery videos that I did. The founder of Rata Novus, the principal place we've been visiting throughout Season 3 and introduced to us in Heart of Thorns. Zinn is a really exciting, really cool character. Is a lot like many of these other little Guild Wars 1 threads in that there's a bit of a mystery about him, and it's awesome to see the devs returning to these topics. So one of the coolest things that you can do in Draconis Mons is try to find all of his recorders. There's an achievement to do it. It's a lot like hunting for Karka, for example, in Lion's Arch. Maybe not as good as the Karka hunt, but you're going to travel around the huge map looking for tiny little cracks and crevices you can worm your way into to get a hold of each of these recorders. I wish that the user interface, the achievement UI, did a little bit better at leading us to these things without having to search for needles and haystacks or going to guides online about it. But I decided just a couple of days ago to travel throughout the map, grab all of the recorders, listen to the audio that comes from them, and talk to you about the story and the updated information we have on Zinn, because I believe they have answered a very long-standing old Guild Wars 1 mystery of this and may have concluded the Zinn story altogether. So it's really quite cool. Hopefully you guys enjoy. Not only do you press F to ding the achievement, but on this one, you actually get to listen to something too, which is, you know, extra rewarding for going around. So first, let's talk about Zinn. If you haven't watched that Guild Wars Mysteries or you're totally out of the loop, essentially this is an Asuran character from Guild Wars 1 that got added to that game very shortly after Eye of the North release. So Eye of the North was the last big product for Guild Wars 1. And then we went into a period of time for that game where there wasn't really much happening anymore. There were occasional updates, and eventually we did have a dedicated team producing what is essentially a Guild Wars 1 version of the living world, known as Guild Wars Beyond, which sought to bridge the gap between the two games while Guild Wars 2 was in development. But shortly after Eye of the North, there wasn't too much going on. And the devs decided to take that time to drop a new quest chain into the campaigns. It spread across all three campaigns, Tyria, Cantha, and Ilona, and it revolved around this character called Zinn. The ultimate reward for it was the unlocking of a hero AI whose build you could customize and would run around with you out in the world. A hero called MOX, a dervish hero. You unlocked MOX because of Zinn, and this story with this Asura. So we don't have to get into too many details about Zinn, and after this initial event quest chain got added, there were actually further developments on the story about how he ended up helping out in the Crichton Civil War and so forth. But there is a mystery that immediately was established about Zinn that I think this patch has answered. So Zinn as an Asura was being mentored by another Golomancer, a character we met in Eye of the North called Ula, but eventually struck out on his own, left Ula, left Blim, struck out on his own, and caused a disaster when his new variety of golems that he'd been making went rogue and tried to assassinate several world leaders of the time. So a prince in Ilona, Queen Salma as well. This was before the Civil War as well. It would have been devastating if Salma had been taken out. And the Emperor in Canthu. He made some golems that went rogue. And the question, the mystery has always been, well, how did that happen? So during this quest, back in Guild Wars 1, you could read from Zinn's something called the Golem User Manual, which is this little book he sends to players, and you can read it to get a bit of backstory about him and learn about MOX and so forth. And in this book, he addresses the various things that have happened. And he writes this, so I will read this out. This is dialogue from Guild Wars 1 that will be relevant in just a moment with Draconis Mons here in Guild Wars 2. So, he says, the job. That's what started this whole fiasco. My entire business has been built on the backs of eccentric clients, so it never even occurred to me to turn away the stranger when he appeared. He had a most curious request, but again, I was not about to refuse a paying customer, so I obliged the dastardly fellow. He even brought along a custom power crystal to be used in the construction of a golem. This, perhaps, should have raised a red flag, but free parts are free parts, especially when I can still charge full price. But I swear, had I known the extent of the evil to which I was contributing, I would have halted construction immediately, or at least built in more safeguards. As it was, I laboured for weeks on end to complete what in my hubris I believed was my ultimate masterpiece. But in my hour of greatness, that masterpiece became my downfall. So that's Zinn talking about building these golems that eventually rebelled, went rogue, and started trying to assassinate world leaders. And that's all the information we really got on this specific thing. Some eccentric person, a male, went to Zinn, gave him this core, and sabotaged Zinn in an attempt to sow chaos around Tyria way back when. This is a Guild Wars 1 mystery that has never been answered. Who is the mysterious stranger? I think we're about to find out. So let's fast forward. We here after this, obviously we settle this, we stop the world leaders being assassinated. Zinn goes off to do enormous good in the Crichton Civil War, extracts seer essence, protects the people from some remaining Massart during the Crichton Civil War, and as Guild Wars 1 closes, last we knew Zinn was in the area of Divinity's Reach. Then, fast forward to Heart of Thorns, we find out that Zinn eventually left there and founded a secret city called Rata Novus. And in Heart of Thorns, we find, of course, that Rata Novus was destroyed by the Chuck. And in my recent Guild Wars mystery, I proposed that maybe Zinn was in the underlevels of the city, that maybe he'd found a way to continue to survive, that maybe he was the leader of the Inquest, like the mysterious leader of the Inquest that we didn't know about. And those were the general theories about Zinn. And some of those have been now put to bed, because in this patch, in Flashpoint, we head to Draconis Mons. We find out that Zinn, after the Chuck attacked Rata Novus, Zinn tried to make a new city. He went to the Fire Island Chain, and he tried to build Rata Arcanum. And then we get to read all of his recorders and get extra lore for those of us who have been looking for it. So a quick reminder as well, by the way, that Draconis Mons used to be purely underground, and the Asura building cities underground. You know, you think of Zinn, Rata Novus was underground. It makes sense he'd try to build Rata Arcanum underground. And in this lore in a second, we're actually going to hear some good reasons why he came here to the Fire Island Chain. So, recording 1 says this.
Is the recorder on? All right. For posterity, we've been ousted once again, exiled by overgrown ants. I got as many crew out through Asura Gate Alpha as I could, but the situation was dire. The gate has self-destructed. There's no going back. I know not whether Kala and the Novus crew are dead or alive. Good resources lost. We transferred most of the animals in my menagerie and enough food crates to help keep us fed for a while. We can do this.
Okay, so here he mentions overgrown ants. If you guys aren't quite sure what he might be meaning there, that's obviously referring to the Chuck. He's talking about how he was ousted by the Chuck at his previous city. He ran off. There's a really cool thing immediately. I love so much of what they did here, guys. I can't wait to share it all with you. But here immediately, he mentions an Asura here called Kala. He says, I know not where Kala and the Novus crew. He doesn't know whether they're dead or not. Kala was actually referenced in Heart of Thorns. There's a side achievement at the Rata Novus mission in Heart of Thorns, where you can hear about Kala and another Asura who were trying to get out of the city. And these were the basis, the fundamentals of this idea that there might be more Asura hidden in the inner city. So it's really cool that Living World Season 3 got to mention Kala here. It put a massive smile on my face the second that character was mentioned. We hear that Zinn had a menagerie. Maybe there's a suggestion that some of the ecosystem here, at least in the Fire Island Chain, or in, Draconis Mons, that maybe some of them are resulting, breeding from this menagerie that Zinn had. It's a really weird idea, isn't it, guys? Because if you think about it, it's like he had all these animals. He had a menagerie deep underground where they'd never seen natural sunlight, or they would through the optical cables or whatever. It's a really weird idea. It reminds me of when I used to play a lot of Minecraft and I tried to build gardens on the bottom, near the bedrock. Weird little thing to suddenly be reminded of in the middle of playing Guild Wars 2. But yeah, so the menagerie I don't really think is too important. It's funny, Guild Wars 2 has never really talked much about menageries. I think there's a Melandri's menagerie in Divinity's Reach, and that's about it. But anyway, so that's the first recording. Kind of just introduced us to the fact that, Zinn came here, and he saw potential.
I'm looking at this cavern and see nothing but potential. It's isolated, defensible, and brimming with magic. I had not intended to come here so soon, but needs must and all that. I have my golems and a dozen crew members. It will have to be enough. The eternal alchemy has decided that it's time to build Rata Arcanum.
So there's not too much to pick at here. It's a great little bit of dialogue. Obviously, we hear he sees potential, that he wants to build the place up. It's interesting he says that this area of the world is brimming with magic. Because in actuality, Primordus wasn't necessarily here at the time. So why is it brimming with magic? Something to do with the Bloodstone nearby or something? I'm not really sure. Or maybe it's because of the Druids, because don't forget, Zinn wasn't the first to this cavern. The Druids were the first to this cavern. We'll get their side of the story in another upcoming video, but the Druids are kind of hanging around here at the moment. And later in these recordings, we'll actually hear that Zinn learns to tap into the Druids and get magic out of them. But yeah, so he says the Eternal Alchemy has decided that it's time to build Rata Arcanum. Next one.
This volcano's throat will give us critical knowledge to help us go after Primordus. It will provide the means to test flame-resistant armor and weapons. Fear not. I still embrace our original goal. I am now thrice exiled, from the home of my youth, from Rata Sum, and from Rata Novus. We'll do whatever it takes to climb back to the top of the food chain, and Primordus is the ladder.
So this is really interesting. There's a couple of things to pick at here. This one's actually a bit annoying. Some of these are quite tough to find. I'll try not to talk about doing the achievement itself and fixate more on the lore here. But there's a few cool things we can pull on here. First of all, he mentions that he came here because it will provide means to test flame-resistant armor and weapons. Great. I like that so much. It makes a lot of sense. He did care most about Primordus. If you remember Rata Novus and the Dragon Lab, they were mostly looking at Primordus. I think that coming top level from Zinn is really cool. And yeah, it makes sense that might be why he's on the Fire Island chain. So that was very awesome. And remember in the patch as well, we have Timey coming down in Scruffy. And some people have said, hey, maybe that's not so weird. Maybe that's exactly the kind of defense Timey would be going for on her golem, because maybe she cares a lot about Primordus as well. And I think that's a reasonable thing to say. Moving on, let's get to the next recording.
Though I have no theory as to how they got here, we've discovered creatures living in the cavern. Occasionally, for example, I catch sight of a nature spirit. I presume these are relatives of the Druids of Maguma. They watch us constantly, but do not let us get close enough to interact with them.
So, here we go. Right, he's began to hear see the Druids, notice signs of them. And through all these recordings, essentially what they're doing, guys, is they're setting up that Zinn is a bastard, and he's ignoring the Druids when he shouldn't be, and the Druids don't like him here. Of course, we all know the fate of Rata Arcanum. If you've played the patch or watched any of my videos, Rata Arcanum was not a success. It didn't even get out of, principal building stages, because the Druids of that grotto kicked all of the Asura out. So you know what the end is here. You know that Zinn's going to get into trouble with these Druids, and you get to see him just be, hand wave them and act bigger than them and have his huge ego. He's like the perfect Asura to me. I love it so much. But yeah, this is his first sights of the Druids of a nature spirit. He presumes that they're relatives of the Druids of the Maguma, and we'll get more of that on the Druid side of things in an upcoming video, like I say.
I've decided to build research vaults where we can work in safety, away from beast and insect attacks. The golems have nearly finished the first one. In the meantime, we're culling and corralling the local beasts. I won't allow local wildlife or anything to hinder us this time. I've learned my lesson. Kill or be killed.
So, this is curious. I've learned my lesson. Kill or be killed. I think that this was probably his first mistake with the Druids. This is the kind of thing that the Druids wouldn't like to see him doing, upsetting the balance, disturbing the balance so much. But yeah, this is almost an interesting one to me, because he's talking about the research vaults that we go to in the main story. And it's like, that always could have been a part of the main story, this little message here, because it teaches you a bit more about the vaults that you travel to before you get to go and chase Balthazar. But yeah, so nice little recording there.
The golems finished building the fourth vault, so I ordered them to turn their attention to the city's foundation. The vaults have kept my crew safe while performing their research. There are 4 scattered around the cavern. I've claimed the first one, as my tools are already there, and my research is obviously the most important.
Again, another one that feels like it could have been woven into the main plot story. We hear about the foundations of the city now being built. Obviously, his important is the most important, and so he has the most important vault. Yes, okay, I'm sure that's true, Zinn.
Finding food has become difficult. Nothing grows here. The beasts aren't exactly tasty. And the mushrooms? No. I had an idea, though. I'm building a device that uses cuttings and food scraps to create new growth. Early tests have proven successful, and I grew a potato shaped like Mox this morning. I am optimistic.
All right, potato hype. Oh, the best, guys. He's made a potato shaped like MOX. I would love to see that as some Guild Wars 2 merchandise, no doubt. Anyway, so yeah, he's now messing with the ecosystem even more. Not only is he killing loads of things that were natively there, perhaps, damaging a lot of them, but now he's also, you know, manufacturing lots of stuff that shouldn't maybe be there. I can imagine the Druids getting even more annoyed with this, though they haven't popped up for a while. And so, moving on to number 8.
These fools must stop bothering me so I can make progress. All their warnings and pessimism weighs on my nerves. I'm about to create a garden from nothing more than dried seeds and roots. We will feast. If getting tricked by Joko was the low point of my career, this will be the high point. I am ecstatic.
And there we have it. All right, number 8 is probably the biggest, coolest, craziest thing for so many reasons here. Out of all, I think it's 14 recordings that we get. This one is awesome. Is this the answer to the mystery, guys? Yes. Zinn says, if getting tricked by Joko was the low point of my career, this will be the high point. I'm ecstatic. People have speculated and wondered. Joko has been on the list as to maybe this is the answer to that mystery of who tricked Zinn way back when, right? He's talking about getting tricked as if that was some kind of low point of his career. That seems like a great answer to me. I will take that pretty much as a given. It's maybe not 100,000% guaranteed to be the resolution to the mystery, but it certainly seems like that, right? It seems like in this Flashpoint patch, guys, they looked back at that way old mystery that probably not even that many of us cared about too much anymore, and they said, yeah, look, let's reveal it. Zinn was tricked by Joko. And it kind of makes sense. It kind of makes sense that Joko would want to sow a bit of chaos, a bit of discord around the land to maybe create some mess that he can weave between and make his rise to power that he obviously was aiming for in Alona a little bit better. What you guys should remember is that Zinn was added in a patch after Eye of the North came out, and Zinn was embellished upon a lot in the War in Kryta arc of Guild Wars Beyond. Guild Wars Beyond was supposed to eventually deal with a storyline in Alona, and that storyline in Alona could have dealt a lot with Joko. So it makes sense that those early devs back during the Guild Wars Beyond days might have wanted to set up some kind of a mystery with Zinn and then answer it later in the Alolan arc of Guild Wars Beyond. But then Guild Wars 2 released and they kind of dropped the Guild Wars Beyond stuff, and we never got to see it until now in Flashpoint when they've gone full circle. So this is really awesome. It's awesome for so many reasons, not just that there's this old mystery that's been answered, right? Because you might think, well, what does that mean, WP? How does that actually help? Well, maybe not too much, but I am very excited that Joko was mentioned, right? Just the fact that Joko's been mentioned at all recently, you'll find quite often what the devs do is they mention an idea, and then later it kind of becomes relevant, but they've mentioned it there to get a bit of chatter out about it, to make people think about it, to make people talk about it, and remind people of various set pieces. Like a great example of this was in Season 2, before the Revenant was announced, or anything really to do with the Revenant was going on, or we knew about the Legend channeling or anything, we had the patch in the Dermond Priory Library, where conveniently there were books talking very explicitly about every single one of the heroes that Revenants would eventually be able to channel. And what that did was that reminded the Guild Wars 2 player base of who these were a little more, just in time for the Revenant to be revealed. And they do that kind of stuff all the time. So the fact that now we've had a mention of Joko in a contemporary pack, a voice acted mention, I don't know whether Joko has ever been mentioned in Guild Wars 2 voice acting, ever. Maybe somewhere in the Austin district in Divinity's Reach, he's had some kind of voice acted, announcement. But that's cool to me. That's really interesting. And, the mystery isn't necessarily over here either, right? If Joko does come into the story at some point coming up, we could have Joko talking about his side of things. And he could mention, oh, I tricked that Zinn at some point, and there you go. We'd have absolute and utter confirmation there. Really cool stuff. How that happened, how Joko initially heard of Zinn, and what Joko's explicit endgame was. Maybe we still don't know. Maybe we don't need to know. I loved this, having Joko there. That's absolutely brilliant. And yeah, very, very, very cool stuff. It's nice.
Stand back, everyone. Prepare to be amazed. Haha! Look at the fruit ripen. What magic my genius has wrought. If only Ula could see me now. My terraformer is ready for phase 2. I will transform the entire ledge outside Vault Prime.
Oh, okay, so two things. Obviously, he's built his terraformer. His plan is to terraform this chasm. It's absolutely awesome. That's the kind of thing the Druids would hate, obviously. But there's a reference to Ula here. Yes, there's a reference to Ula. That makes me very happy. To me, guys, if you look at Zinn as a character, you really can't talk about Zinn, or really, when you look at his origins, without also looking at his relationship with Ula, and what Ula was like, and what Ula did, and how these people treated one another. And the fact that he's still thinking of her and smearing her all these years later. Like, Zinn is old at this point. Ula was probably gone at this point. Like, by this time in the story, he's like at least 100 years old, I think. And so to hear Ula there, I love that the devs remembered that these two characters had a little bit of a connection, and Ula gets a mention in this audio. Oh, that almost made me geek out as much as the joke, I think. Seriously.
Ignoramus druids, dim-witted nincompoop druids, you don't have the brain power to understand what I have accomplished. You're not the first druids I've encountered, and you won't be the last. Every year sees the births of small-minded humans obsessed with simplicity. Go back to your caves and waterfalls. You gave up life, flesh, and blood to commune with nature. So what? Am I supposed to be impressed? This is my Tyria too.
You are warping nature. We cannot allow this. You must cease immediately.
Or what? What will you do? Watch me to death? Please. Guards, seize them! The experiment must go on. Stop recording!
So, I mentioned this a little bit earlier. First of all, this recording's a bit interesting. We actually get more than just Zinn's voice. We hear a druid there as well. But so, yeah, Zinn says that he's encountered the Maguman druids already. I don't think there was any explicit moment we saw that happening, but it stands to reason that if he had a secret lair in the Maguma jungle for ages, that perhaps at some point he would have encountered the druids there. Or hell, even around the construction of Rata Arcanum and all that stuff, he might have encountered the druids. Or hell, any of the stuff on the Tarnished Coast the druids were pretty close to. So, I think that that's all perfectly fair. I think this is kind of cool as well as a piece of audio as a recording, because this is the devs sort of taking an opportunity slightly to teach new or unfamiliar players a bit more about the druids. You know, you see how they managed to sneak that information in there about what the druids are, about, you know, shedding their flesh and so forth. That's textbook definition of the druids, really. And so, of course, the story of the recordings here we get here as well. The druids are still watching. They're still warning him. They're giving him every single opportunity. They're being passive, and they're giving every opportunity for Zinn to get out of there. But he's a dick Asura, and he's ignoring them, and I love him for it.
My terraformer isn't strong enough, but I have a brilliant plan. The druids will help me, like it or not. They give off delectable nature magic, the kind I need to take my experiment to the next level. I've begun siphoning it off them. A small sacrifice for the advancement of magiscience. It won't kill them immediately.
And so Zinn gets even worse here. He's so self-interested. He's so cruel. Like I say, the perfect Asura. Not only are the druids wanting him to leave, he's now, you know, not even ignoring them anymore, but he's going to try and use them, like it or not.
Greetings, druids. You need look no further. Your friends are our guests. I can imagine your concern. They're helping with an experiment, so you can turn around and go back where you came from. Nice seeing you.
Who are you? What are you doing?
They call me the sensational Zinn for a reason. You may call me Sir. Golems, please shoo our visitors away.
We will find them. We see you.
And I see through you. You don't have the power to stop me. Go, before I have you all destroyed. Bye now.
Reference here to him being the sensational Zinn. We'd actually heard him call himself the sensational Zinn before, back in GW1, so that's another nice little throwback there, and obviously he's pissing the druids off pretty majorly. He says, go before I have you all destroyed, and of course every player that's listening to this at this point knows that Zinn cannot destroy the druids. The druids kind of trumped him here.
I humbly announce that our garden is a success. The time has come to move on to Phase 3. First thing tomorrow, I will terraform the entire cavern. The schedule has been posted. Oh, by the way, I do not recommend getting in front of the beam. It has had unexpected effects on living creatures.
And this is the penultimate recording here, number 13. He talks about, you know, his plan to terraform the entire cavern. He was 1 day away from doing that. They've posted the schedule. There's this interesting thing about the beam. I recommend not getting in front of the beam. It seems very specific detail about how he's doing it. And the fact that it has unexpected effects on living creatures. Do you guys think that the devs are setting something up there or talking about that in some way there? What is that beam? Maybe we don't have to care about it. But yeah, just as he's about to do it, and then the final recording, and this one's pretty big as well.
This is history in the making. Our enemies think they can chase us out of our home. Nay! Today we bring our Rata Arcanum to life. Our final home. Never again will anyone exile us from... Ah!
It's the Druids! They're back! And there's more of them!
They killed Zinn! No!
Run! Ah!
Defense protocol engaged. Stand your ground.
And, well, there you go. That is the last recording. So, in some ways, this is quite a sad story. You know, he got exiled and exiled again and exiled again. You know, he ends up dying before he can finally make a home for himself. But at the end of the day, right or wrong, he is a dick. He's a nasty person, and he's so dismissive of everyone else. It's kind of hard to feel sorry for him in the end. And I love that about Zinn. But yeah, so he died. So this is a bit of a development, right? And I really do think he is dead. So I'd heard when this patch came out, but before I listened to the recordings, that they might have killed Zinn off. And people were wondering, oh, well, did he really die? Did they fake it? Is he maybe still the leader of the Inquest? Do some of these other theories still perhaps hold up? Was this all just a trick to get people to stop following him, get him off his back? But I think that the way the devs have given this to us, the way it's all been presented, I really do think Zinn probably is dead. I mean, the cavern speaks for itself. Rata Arcanum doesn't exist. It was destroyed. The Druids are left. The golems talk about what happened. I don't think this is a big conspiracy. I think that the devs killed Zinn. I actually think that what happened here, guys, is very similar to what happened with the Sol D'Alessio stuff in the recent raid, where the devs saw that a lot of players were looking for the answers to this character and the conclusion of this mystery and whatnot, but they didn't want to expand it into some massive, long, spiraling thing that sort of swallowed up the whole story or whatever. So they answered the questions they were about them to a reasonable extent, and then they closed the book, right? Like, this is the end of Zinn's story, rather than going kind of crazy with all this other stuff. Maybe there is a very slim chance Zinn is still out there, but I think I'm pretty satisfied with the idea that he's dead here. Are you guys still in the camp that maybe he's still alive and kicking and around? Generally, I'm pretty satisfied with the story. Again, just like with the Sol D'Alessio thing, I think they could have taken him into a lot of really crazy, cool, interesting directions. Maybe he did find a way to keep himself alive somehow, and maybe he did, you know, through his understanding of golemancy and necromancy, and maybe he did, you know, end up leading the Inquest, and all these crazy things could have happened. But also, I think I'm reasonably satisfied with this here, that they've closed the chapter there. That's kind of what happened to Zinn. Who knows, if we meet Palawa Joko in the future, we could get a little bit more of his story in there. There's also the potential that, you know, Ula's dead, but she's still around. We can still speak to her ghost, right? It just so happens she's not got anything interesting to say in the story because she's just a looping dynamic event. But we can still interact with her ghost. There's a chance maybe we'll see Zinn's ghost somewhere at some point if they really feel the need of forcing him in there. But to me, I think that this is the devs closing that story down. And I'm pretty happy, I must say, overall. I'm happy that we got these cool references. I think it was an okay end to everything. And that, you know, he had another failed city. He was cruel and horrible and malicious and self-interested to the end. And it came back to bite him in the arse. Makes the Druids look pretty powerful as well at this. And overall, I just like that Season 3 got to this. Look at all these big topics that the devs actually managed to get to after all this time. I think that's absolutely brilliant. And, you know, as we wind it into the next expansion here. So there you go, guys. That's the story of Zinn. That's a big recap for you all. Thanks very much for listening. Let me know what you thought. I really, really liked what the devs did here. I like the exploration of Draconis Mons with this style of thing. And hopefully they do more in the future. It would have been nice to have, like, a book so we could listen to each recording. But, hey, slowly but surely, they're getting better. Thanks very much, guys. I hope you enjoyed. I'll see you in the comments, and I'll see you next time.